Wow, I was not paying attention. And all of a sudden I look up and it says it's showtime. So here we go. It's showtime. Okay, here we go. Happy Thursday, everybody. It's Thursday night, and it means it's about us. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Thank you to all who have joined us live, and thank you to all that are watching the recording. So earlier I was playing around with my sound, and there's a little bit of reverb. Sounds like maybe I'm in a tin can. So it's a work in progress. We're just going to leave it at that. And if you have joined us live, please leave a comment so that I can say hi. We're streaming to Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. So just let me know who you are and where you're watching. That would be great for me to know. Beautiful day today. I can't believe how cool it was. This morning we had some great cloud cover. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous, cool morning, and my apartment didn't get over 80 degrees today, so I'm thankful for where I live. But there are some new things coming along, and so let's get into that. So like I said, I've been working with my audio. My audio is going through Logic Pro, which is actually a audio processing software usually used for post-production. But I figured out a way to run it through my system so I can actually use all the various tools to modify my sound. I'm still working on it. We'll get there. We'll get there at some point. The other thing that I'm working on is something called OBS, which is some software that processes the video. And right now I'm using my built-in camera on my laptop. Usually I use my phone as a webcam, but tonight I'm using my laptop just to see, contrast and everything. So let me flip over to OBS and we'll see what that looks like, and let me know what you think. There you go. Changes the picture somewhat, makes it a little darker. I like it, but I'm not the one watching. So let me know what you think. We'll probably leave it like that. Oh, here's a comment. Hey, Ruben, good evening. Welcome. Welcome. Excuse me. That was a nice altar that you put up there that you posted on Facebook and Instagram. Good job. It was really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. I hope to get down there at some point to actually um, see things in person. That'd be awesome. So OBS, I'm still going through the tutorials for OBS, learning how to use it and all the different tools that it has. Yeah. So once again, that's a work in progress. And so, like all things, the show is going to evolve, um, and yeah, we'll see where it ends. It's just fun. It's a nice little hobby for me, and I hope that everyone that is participates gets something out of it. Also, that's the whole point, right? It's about us. And as I was explaining to a friend earlier today, um, without you, there's no us. So it's absolutely crucial, right, that I always include other folks. As a matter of fact, that's sort of the theme for tonight. I sort of picked individualism and community. So we're going to talk about a few concepts. But before we get into that, there's another segment of the show that I like to talk about, and I call it a COVID minute. It's where we sort of update as to where we're at locally, statewide, countrywide, worldwide, where we're going with this thing called COVID-19, the Delta variant. Delta variant, it's all in the news right now. It's a big deal, and there's a lot of confusion. The CDC posted up some stuff, some guidelines that really threw everybody into a tizzy because it wasn't clear, and made people worried. Even people that are fully vaccinated began to worry about breakthrough infections and the possibility of transmission. And yeah, that was a difficult time, and I'm not sure that people really truly understand it even still. And here's my good friend CMB, Champagne Music Box. Hey, Uli, welcome aboard. I'm guessing you're coming in from Twitchland, yeah? That's cool, man. Let me know how it works. Yeah, I'm running OBS and I'm running my audio through Logic Pro. So, there's some changes that I'm going through just to see how things work. And I'm going to continue tweaking it. I'm not completely happy. So, learning the tools and kind of fun. But in any event, so I was watching a video of a podcast, and they had on there for the first 15 minutes, they had a doctor on from a very distinguished university talking about really what's going on with the Delta variant and people who are fully vaccinated. Yeah, Twitch zombie. Well, welcome to my brain, right? What's going on with that Delta variant and fully vaccinated folks? The percentage of people who are fully vaccinated, the percentage of those people who are actually vulnerable to come down to be an actual infection, right? It's very, very small. I mean, very, very, very small. The vaccine, if you have a Pfizer or Moderna, for sure, works really, really well against the Delta variant because it's not a different virus. It's just a different kind of that same virus, right? The coronavirus, the COVID-19. It's just a mutation, so it does really well. And even a smaller percentage can carry a viral load high enough to be transmissible. It's very rare, very, very, very rare. So we don't need to be in fear of doing that, but it's still good to wear a mask just because you may be in that small population. You don't know, right? There's no way to know. So, as my mom used to say, better safe than sorry. Just wear a mask and social distance and do what you need to do. But the main problem is with folks that are unvaccinated, no vaccine. And that's where the pandemic is thriving right now. And that's where all these big numbers are coming from. So we still need to communicate with our friends, the importance of vaccination. And I think for me anyway, a lot of my friends are already vaccinated. That just comes with the territory of the kind of people that I surround myself with. And but you never know who might be listening when you post something up. So welcome here as we just wrapping up a little discussion on COVID-19 and the Delta variant. And if you've got any comments, if you know anyone that has gotten sick recently or someone that was fully vaccinated, that yeah, it's absolutely right. OBS makes it look darker. At least it does with the settings that I've used, the filters that I've used. So I've got to decide whether I like it darker or not. And we'll see. I don't know. But yeah, it definitely does. You're right for noticing that. There's all kinds of settings, right? There's all kinds of filters, and I'm still going through them one by one. The main thing that I was working on was the skin tone. That was my main concern, because I didn't want to pay for the Reincubate Camo, which is the software for my phone when I use it as a webcam. You can pay and you can get all these little filters and play around with everything. And I didn't want to pay for it. So I thought OBS might be the way to go. So welcome if you've just joined us this evening as we talk about community and individualism. So, let's kind of dive into it. I got some books, I'm a book reader and have not an extensive library, but I got a pretty decent library. And I've got these books at my hand. Thank you, my friend. I know you work hard on yours. And it's, it's natural. Soap and water, baby. Soap and water. Sometimes not even soap, just water. Fortunately, I've got good genes. And as I'm aging, I don't have a lot of wrinkles. And I'm just going to digress for a minute with the gorgeous skin comment. When I was growing up, I had super oily skin, and I had acne, and it was just I was doing everything I could to get rid of the excess oil. But now I'm wondering whether or not all that oil actually allowed my skin to be more supple. I don't know. So maybe there's a trade-off there: oily skin, supple skin. I think there might be something to it, but we'll leave that to the dermatologists to figure out. So let me see what I've got here in my book. I got 2 stacks of books, believe it or not. And I took some notes. I actually prepared tonight. Go figure. So I got to see what I've got. They're kind of behind me, so it's not really convenient. Here's one book I pulled off my shelf. Oh my gosh. Where's my camera? The Empathic Civilization. The ginormous book. But it's really good. And I'm going to reference that a little bit later tonight. We'll put that there, get it out of the way. Here we go. So a couple of things happen in my work life as an adult. One of the things was I joined the Catholic Church. And I went to work for an organization, Resources for Independent Living, that provided resources and various tools, strategies for people with disabilities to live independently in the community. And my executive director, Frances Grace Child, was very active in social justice. And she started talking to me about Catholic social teaching, which I knew nothing about. I mean, I went through the whole catechism. I went through everything. And I never really heard about Catholic social teaching. So, as I am wont to do, here's a book. This is a compendium of the social doctrine of the church. You can see that there. It's got some great artwork and everything. And it talks about many of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So some of the words we're going to talk about is, let me just run the words off. these different concepts. And as always, I'd love to hear your own take on it, your own opinion. We're going to talk about solidarity. We're going to talk about common good. And I'm going to try to give definitions for these things. Something called personalism. Personalism is something you may never have come across. And we're going to contrast personalism with individualism. It's very interesting. Community. What is it? What does the word even mean? Empathy and mirror neurons. Have you heard of mirror neurons? Very, very interesting in the scientific world. And then lastly, we'll look at individualism. But let's just take a peek here and see what we've got here. The principle of, okay, well, that's solidarity. I don't want solidarity. I don't want subsidiarity either. I'm so silly. There's common good. So maybe, I don't know, solidarity. I do want solidarity. You know, sometimes my brain goes sideways and the word, principle of solidarity. I don't want that. I'm looking for something else. No, that's what I was looking for. Go figure it. Welcome to my brain for sure. Okay. So let's start unpacking some of this stuff. Solidarity highlights in a particular way the intrinsic social nature of the human person. Okay. So we're looking at the intrinsic social nature of the human person, the equality of all in dignity and rights, and the common path of individuals and peoples toward an ever more committed unity. That's solidarity. Solidarity. So we're recognizing the dignity of the human person and all the rights that come with that. And together we are working to a greater unity, right? As we support and we emphasize the dignity of the human person. It talks about interdependence. I think interdependence is, you know, I was talking to this friend of mine this morning. We were having coffee, and we talked about interdependence and this whole idea of being a self-made man or self-made woman. You know, I did it all on my own, and how that's not true in any way, shape, or form. You know, everything that we have, the clothes on our back, the spaces where we live, if we drive an automobile, you know, all of it was created by somebody and not me, right? So we're interdependent upon each other in many, 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 many ways. So let's see, this whole next thing here is solidarity is a social principle and a moral value, moral virtue. The new relationships of interdependence between individuals and peoples. So there's a solidarity of individuals and there's a solidarity of peoples, groups of peoples, nations, which are de facto forms of solidarity, have to be transformed into relationships tending towards genuine, ethical, social solidarity. So it's not enough just to have interdependence. It needs to be working towards a genuine, ethical, social solidarity. Okay. It goes on here. It says, solidarity is also an authentic moral virtue, not a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortunes of so many people, both near and far. On the contrary, it is a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. We're going to be talking about that. That is to say, to the good of all and of each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. That's the concept behind solidarity. We are all responsible for all. A very famous statement that was made in the book of Genesis in the Bible, which was quoted by President Barack Obama, was the question that God asked Cain. God asked Cain, where is your brother? And Cain had murdered his brother Abel. God's asking, it's always funny when God asks questions because, of course, he knows the answer already. It's a test, right? Are we going to be honest? So he asks Cain, where's your brother? And Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? That's the question. And the implied answer is yes, because there were consequences for Abel killing Cain. And yes, we are our brother's keeper. We are expected to look out for one another. And when we get into empathy and the empathic civilization, we're going to talk a little bit about how that works in the mirror neurons. Before we move on, though, to the common good, and honestly, these concepts, there's a lot to them, and it's more than just what we can handle tonight. But this is it's something that's been on my mind, and it has to do with the fact that we're having such a difficulty, not just in the United States, but globally, in really putting this pandemic to bed. Having a lot of trouble doing it, and I personally feel that it's because we as humanity, in many places, we've lost the ability to apprehend the common good and to be in solidarity one with another in dealing with this thing. And I just need to sort of get this off my chest. This is what I believe. And it would be wonderful if this message could go out and we could at least talk about it, right? I want to share another quote in regards to solidarity. Now, this quote comes from Pope John Paul II, Saint. And let's see if I can find it here. Seriously? Where is it? Not going to be there, not going to be there, not going to be there. So I'm going to have to hang on a second here. Before I do that, I'm actually going to go back and have to pull it up. I don't know why I must have dumped it out somewhere. Who knows? Who knows, Chris? I don't know. So let's see if I can fill up the space here. Whoopsie. Fill up the space here. It's talking while I'm looking. Talking while I'm looking. Oh, you know what? I know why I didn't do that. It's so easy for me to forget things. And that's really true, isn't it? And we're going to get into some of this truly when we get into the common good and when we get into just a lot of these concepts that capitalism, especially as we practice it today, just doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. But so here's what I want to throw up. Here's the quote. I did this earlier and I forgot I did this. So let's take a look at this. Okay. Solidarity is not a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortunes of so many people, both near and far. Now, we heard that when I talked about from the book of Catholic Social Teaching. On the contrary, it is firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. That is to say, to the good of all and of each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. And I just read that, but this is where it comes from. St. John Paul II on social concern. So that's where that concept comes from. And what it entails, it's not just it's just not standing with someone or saying I support you or going out and, there's an action that's attached to it. So, a while back, I posted up a question on my Facebook page. I'm going to go take a look at it real quick here. Here it is. Here's my phone. And I asked the question. I said, what does solidarity mean to you? Right? And let me get some of my answers here. Of course, I had it all set up prior to the show, and it's not here anymore. So let's just give it a scroll till we get down to it. There it is. What does solidarity mean to you? There were 17 comments, and we had things like this. I think there's an element of unconditional love involved. Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to ignore minor flaws and mistakes others in your group make, or just different various attitudes and opinions. Maybe not ignore, but accept as valid, work with it, adapt to accomplish mutual goals. Another person said, same risks, same focus, all participants have skin in the game, with a question mark. Meaning, I think that's what it means, but maybe I'm not sure. Here's one. We are in together. We either rise together or we fall together. It means that we stand together in our support of each other's beliefs, not necessarily that we share the same beliefs, but that we respect and support each other. And there are more, and it's all pretty much in the same vein, right? But there's an action that's attached. That means that we actually work towards that solidarity. So there's things we do, right? Whether it's marching, whether it's signing petitions, whether it's making calls to our elected representatives, or even being informed so that when we vote, that it's an informed vote. All these things that we have to do to actually be in solidarity with one another. Because I personally believe that no matter, if you look at it in the political realm, not the social realm, but the political realm, and there's some overlap there, right? That there's a spectrum. There's a few people on this end, a few people on that end, and then there's like a bell curve. There's a lot of people in the middle, and so there's not going to be consensus, but there can still be solidarity, because hopefully, regardless of what your political persuasion is, the goal is the same. It's for the betterment of all, and for the good of the country, to move it forward, to be an example, so that every prosper, dignity of every person can be recognized, and their potential as individuals can be more easily realized, and that we work together for that sort of thing. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm not so sure that's what it is. So let's take a look now here at the common good, because that's what we're working towards. When we're in solidarity one with another, what we're doing is we're working for the common good. So let's see. Page 72, numbers 164. Page 72. Got to tell myself where to look. Page 72. Oh, there we go. The principle of the common good. I love it when it's so simple like this. The principle of the common good, to which every aspect of social life must be related if it is to attain its fullest meaning, stems from the dignity, unity, and equality of all people. That's where the common good comes from, right? The dignity, the unity, and the equality of all people. The common good does not consist in the simple sum of the particular goods of each subject of a social entity, right? Got to maybe unpack some of that. So a subject is an individual. They're an individual within a social entity. A social entity would be a group of people, right? Belonging to everyone and to each person, it is and remains common because it is indivisible, and because only together it is possible to attain it, increase it, and safeguards its effectiveness with regard also to the future. So the common good relates to the goods that we have that we can only attain together, not what we can attain individually. It's what we can attain together. And it's only as we attain these things together that we then move forward, right? And we are able to then be who we are meant to be, to fully realize our dreams, our hopes, our abilities based on our natural tendencies and our ability to achieve an education, whether it's an academic education or it's a technical education. Doesn't matter. Whatever our strengths are in, we should have that opportunity to develop them. And then we're able to give back, right, to society. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Every age stands on the shoulders of the past age, right? Starting with the earliest inventions, like starting with the invention of the wheel back who knows when, hundreds of thousands of millions of years ago, maybe, to eventually now we have, Formula One, race cars and all this stuff. And it's all based on the wheel. Gear motion. There's all this, the watch basically is a bunch of little tiny wheels, right? All based on that one invention from millions of years ago. So each generation has that opportunity to stand on the shoulders of the previous generation. But it only works if that culture and that society and the treasures of that society are passed on to the following generation. It's the only way that works, right? So we have to be in solidarity, and community is how that happens. If we're simply individuals, then that we might pass up learning something from somebody else, thinking that I can do it on my own. Well, maybe, maybe not. Chances are probably not. So the common good, the responsibility of everyone for the common good. The demands of the common good are dependent on the social conditions of each historical period. I don't know, did I just say that? Maybe. And are strictly connected to respect for and the integral promotion of the person and his fundamental rights. Person, not individual. It says person. We're going to talk about personalism, which is different from individualism. It's a concept that was more prevalent in the early part of the 20th century. And we'll dive into it. It's a philosophy, and there are books written on it. And honestly, it's a topic that can take some time to really understand. But we're going to give it we're going to dip our finger in the water of personalism, so to speak. And actually, I think that's the next word up, actually, that we're going to look at. So if you've got any comments on solidarity, or you've got a comment on the common good, one of the things I think about when I look at the common good is I reflect on the general welfare, because that's in our Constitution, right? To promote, it's part of what our government's all about, is to promote the general welfare. Right? It's very important. That general welfare, the common good, something that's good for everybody. And it helps to drive our civilization forward into even more goodness, right? Even more goodness. Okay, so let's put this book away. We're going to put this book away. We're going to go to another book. I think we're going to go to personalism. Did I say we're going to personalism? I think that's next, right? It is next. Okay. Next book. The Person and the Common Good. Jacques Maritain. Maritain? Guess what? He's French. The Person and the Common Good. It's a great little book. Not easy reading, but it's a good little book. Here's one that's even harder. This was even harder. Check this one out. This one's called Personalism. I mean, go figure, what a name, right? What do you think it's about? Personalism. Emmanuel Monnier, it's another French guy. Very heady, very philosophical. But if you're interested in personalism, this is like a basic text. Ooh, I just crashed into my boom arm and made a fun sound. Okay, so personalism, page 32. I have to do this or I'll never find what I don't have enough bookmarks. I've got more books than bookmarks. So let's see what we got here. Page 32. 32. Okie dokie. So let's see. It's kind of hard. It's kind of, difficult to find a place to start. But here's where we're going to start. All right. In contrast to the expression of Pascal that the self is detestable, the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, that is, come to mind. The person is that which is most noble and most perfect in all of nature. So it's two ways of looking at someone, right? St. Thomas Aquinas, the person is that which is most noble and most perfect in all of nature. That's pretty cool. Whereas Pascal teaches that the self is detestable, St. Thomas teaches that whoever loves God must love himself for the sake of God, must love his own soul and body with the love of charity. How's them apples? Concern for self, or what contemporary psychology calls introversion, I'm an introvert, so I kind of understand this, can wreak much havoc. Those who have been reared in a strict Puritanism are said to complain of a suffering, a kind of interior paralysis created by self-consciousness. On the other hand, philosophers, above all St. Augustine, and in modern times Hegel, teach that self-knowledge is a privilege of the spirit, that much human progress consists in the progress of consciousness of self, which is different. Consciousness of self is different than self-consciousness. Think about it for a second. What do these contradictions mean? They mean that the human being is caught between two poles, a material pole, which in reality does not concern the true person, but rather the shadow of personality, or what in the strict sense is called individuality. Right? It's all those things that make up how the world sees me. You know, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a certain age, I'm a guy, it's all those external things that make up our individuality, which distinguishes me from you and everybody else. So it contrasts, that the humans are caught between these two poles, that material pole, individuality, and the spiritual pole, which does concern true personality. And it goes on, gives some fancy names. Okay, so we're going to put this book aside. We're going to go to another really smart guy who comes from the Catholic tradition. I believe he was a Jesuit. Jesuits are pretty smart guys. Next book. This is not by Teilhard de Chardin, but it talks about him impersonating. It's this Andre fella, and I believe this is also translated from the French. What's with the French? What do they know that nobody else seems to understand? I don't know. So there's a lot of different chapters in here that are really good. There is the person in time, the involvement of the person, the cosmic roots of the person. Really, really interesting stuff. This chapter is the community of persons. Okay. The person's fundamental experience is not separation from, but community with others. Individualism, that is to say, the attitude which centers the individual on himself or herself, is contrary to the natural tendency of the person. So individualism is contrary to our natural tendency, right? Personalism culminates in drawing the individual outside himself or herself and opens him or her to the world of persons, where alone he or she can find his or her authentic being. Our persons. One of the things when I was studying so many different religions and spiritual traditions, talking about who am I? Who truly am I? Where's that within me that's truly me? All this other stuff is not truly me. I mean, I am a this, I am a that, but it's not who I am. that this and that is not who I am. Who I am is this inner core being that is just like everybody else, actually, interestingly. Okay, let's see what else he has to say here. He quotes Monnier. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. Teilhard made an inestimable contribution to personalism with his suggestion that man's future lies in the direction of a deliberately communitarian life. Well, that's an interesting statement. So here we go. Here we're going to get into some more meaty stuff. By nature, the individual is biological. It is my material being insofar as it differs from the others, right? My body is not your body. I am not you. I am uniquely me biologically, unique, one of a kind. It tends towards separation, right? It is also a judicial term evoking the idea of equality, of interchangeability. Individuation implies a leveling of the members of a species and a turning inward of each isolated individual upon itself. Back in I think it was the 70s, late 70s and 80s, that whole movement of self-actualization movement. You had Est and just a whole bunch of other things. People were wanting to be self-actualized. It was me, me, me. My generation, the boomers, were also known as the me generation. Hippies growing up, the me generation, me, 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 me. That's individualism, right? I want to actualize myself. When I started my whole journey more than 20 years ago, with yoga and Zen and all that stuff, Sufism and all that stuff, originally it was very selfish. It was about me wanting to develop myself spiritually without really much regard of anybody else. We were all individual on all these individual paths, and we just sometimes happened to be traveling together. It wasn't until much, much later that I got that we're all in it together. And to stand in solidarity means that part of my responsibility is to do what I can to enhance and allow and support other people on their journey, because our journeys are interwoven. We're not just traveling on the same path. They're interwoven. We're all part and parcel of each other. What else does this say? Okay, so now you can talk about the person. The person is the individual conscious of himself, master of his actions, capable of giving himself. Persons certainly manifest themselves, first of all, to our experience as restricted to finite biological units. But individuality decreases in those units as personality increases. One of the things, if you ever study a lot of Eastern Hindu philosophy about transcending the ego, first you have to have an ego to transcend. And when the Eastern teachers would come to the United States, a lot of their students were trying to transcend their ego. But what these teachers were discovering was we didn't have a firmly developed ego to start with. And so there was nothing really to transcend. And so doing all the things to transcend their ego actually was detrimental, because they hadn't had a well-formed ego to transcend. So the first task was to help people create a firmly developed sense of themselves individually before they could get past that. I think we're still in that space a lot of the times. Personality is at first only a seed deep within each one of us. Whereas my individuality is given to me in the most biological sense, my person is proposed to me, and my task is to finish what is still only an outline. Monnier, we talked about him, right? Says the person grows only by constantly purifying himself or herself of the individual in him, right? The person grows only by constantly purifying themselves of the individual in them. This is so because, contrary to the individual, the person is present to himself in self-consciousness, which is different than being self-conscious. Self-consciousness, meaning that they've gotten to a point where they know who they are. They have come in contact with their true self and are now able then to participate as a person in community. Yeah, this is really, personalism is fascinating, truly, truly fascinating. I'm not sure we're going to go much further into that. Teilhard de Chardin was controversial, if nothing else, but he tried to frame a lot of his concepts where rubber meets the road in life, but also on a very cosmic scale. So some of this goes into that, the cosmic scale of things. It's very fascinating. So we're going to leave him behind for now. And we're going to delve into community. What is community? I think a lot of us have a sense, we have a sense of community, but I'm not sure how good we actually are about community. I'm going to do one last thing. I actually made another little overlay here on personalism. So let's take a look at that. Personalism, let me remove this little thing here. It'd be easy to read. There we go. Personalism is not individualism. Forms of individualism, and I know you can read this, but let's say that you're listening to this and not reading it, or you have, for whatever reason. This is from the New World Encyclopedia online, and I have the address at the bottom. Forms of individualism tend to view the individual as an isolated existence. It, at least, does not capture sufficiently the interdependent relationships by which any individual can define itself. Personalism, on the contrary, conceives the individual as an interdependent existence who has intrinsic relationships with others, such as God and other persons. Very, very different, right? Very, very different. Let's take a look at a comment just showed up here. Hey, Ash. Oh, I'm so happy you could join us this evening. I'm glad we've got back in touch, and I'm congratulations on what's going on with your business right now. I'm sure that coming out of COVID, yeah, it was a hard time, and yeah, so that's awesome. Anyway, let's read what you have to say here. Thank you for this message. We are so interwoven. Agree about the self-actualization being problematic insofar as the me focus seems to have created this entitlement problem. Indeed, I think you're right. But we have to start somewhere as individuals to become more aware. Isn't that the truth? The problem is getting people started, but that's we have to do. Absolutely. This is why the service aspect is so needed. In the act of giving, we hopefully learn to avoid this pitfall. It's absolutely true. Well, there's a prayer attributed to Saint I think it's Saint Francis, and it may be somebody else, but it's in you know what, I don't know. I'm not going to say now. My mind is like, I'm not sure. But the way I remember it is, in giving, we receive. Right? In giving, we receive. And it is by giving that we're participating in solidarity and community. Absolutely. Community. So now I've got some websites on community. Let's see. And I just was picking and choosing, and you may have a completely different perspective. But I think that's, it's time, that we talk about it. It's time that we as a people here in the United States and around the world start thinking about what it means to live in community. So let's see. This is from the online etymology dictionary. Oh, wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Dun, dun. I can actually. Okay. Community. What's the word mean? So, in the late 14th century, a number of people associated together by the fact of residence in the same locality. Okay. Also, the common people, not the rulers or the clergy. It's from Old French, meaning community, commonness, everybody. From the Latin, which meant community, society, fellowship, friendly intercourse, courtesy, condescension, affability, common, public, general, shared by all or many. This is community. So when I say I'm living in a community, there's all that is behind this word, right? An old English word for community was something there, and it means community, fellowship, union, common ownership. Oh, the commons. One of the things we have here in Sacramento is we have the downtown commons, which is really wrong. The commons meant that it was owned by everybody, that it belonged to the community, and the community could use it for whatever they needed to use it for. It's called the commons. And if you go to the downtown commons, there's stores and shops and cement, and it's not really owned by the community, right, at all. And so that's kind of sad. But yeah, in community. So if I'm a person living in community, that means that I'm going to care about that community, right? I'm going to care about, what do we have right now? We have extreme homelessness. We have poverty. We have all kinds of segregation that's taking place. Sacramento is very diverse, one of the most diverse cities in the United States, but it's also segregated. So just because we're diverse doesn't mean we've got it all together. We have to really work on that segregation part. It's something to work on. It's something to focus on. It's something to realize. There's today the city of Sacramento announced they've got this plan, right, to start addressing homelessness, and in it they talked about shooting for $100 million of funding to establish 26 different sites for building affordable housing. And that sounds like a lot of money, right? Well, I also found a document put out by UC Berkeley on the cost of affordable housing. And they discovered in 2016, the cost of building one unit, $450,000, which means that if all you're shooting for is $100 million and each unit costs $450,000, then you're only going to be able to build about 250 units. That's it. And there are thousands of people who are homeless that need housing. So it just shows you the scale, right, of what we're looking at. Doing what we need to do. Focusing on market rate housing is not going to be the solution. It's not going to be our way out. And a plan is only a plan, right? I remember when Kevin Johnson was mayor, he had a plan, 10,000 homes or something, some crazy thing like that. Lots of houses. There was a market rate portion of it, and there was a affordable rate portion of it. And what did they end up doing? They started building all the market rate houses first, right? Never got around to the affordable ones. And Kevin Johnson's out. The plan goes bye-bye. Plans are hardly worth the paper they're written on. You got to put some action behind those plans. But it's a start. But then the solidarity component comes in, which means that we need to get involved. So I think on maybe tomorrow, and City Hall's having a meeting, and they're going to be discussing this. And so people who are really interested in affordable housing, even market rate housing, housing in general, this is an opportunity to get involved, to be in solidarity with our community and for those that are unhoused, right? This is our opportunity. And the one thing they mentioned it twice, and they only mentioned it in passing, something that I was really involved in when I was working, and that is accessibility, physical accessibility. Because when it comes to housing, even if it's affordable, if it's not physically accessible, what good is it? What good is it? It's still unlivable. And so the city's talking about making modifications of accessibility when needed, but it's actually cheaper to build the accessible unit than it is to build an non-accessible unit and then retrofit it later. That's far more expensive. So it's cheaper in the long run to do that accessibility up front. So I may very well attend this meeting and talk about physical accessibility, because it's just not something that seems to be on their radar. When I worked on the Disability Advisory Commission for the county, we talked about it all the time. It's like, if you're going to talk about, so it's like, I call it double A housing, affordable and accessible. Double A housing, affordable and accessible. Always use those two words together, just like out of habit. If you're going to say affordable, say accessible. If you're going to say accessible, say affordable. Affordable and accessible, double A housing. Yeah, that was one of my deals. Did it catch on? No, not really. But I kept talking about it, because you never know that tipping point when all of a sudden it's going to catch on. And that's just one area, right? There's all kinds of areas. There's food insecurity, right? Where are our supermarkets being built? If you've got a neighborhood bodega, what is the quality of the food that's in there? There's all these different things. Are there actual communities where you live, communities within the larger community that have no supermarkets? They just don't. Or farmers markets. So there was a really nice farmers market under the freeway in Sacramento. It's called the XY freeway. It's the freeway that connects 80 to 50, right? It just crosses through town, and then 50 and 80 split. And that's the XY freeway. There's a really nice farmers market underneath of it that was accessed by people from, Curtis Park and Southland Park and downtown and Midtown. All kinds of people would go to get some really great food, grown by local producers. Well, Caltrans wanted to do some work on the XY freeway, so they had to move them out. Where did they move them to? Anywhere close by? Of course not. It's the parking lot at Arden Fair Shopping Mall. That's where they moved them to. That's like miles and miles. People who may have ridden their bicycles or walked, it's too far. And so that whole neighborhood now is deprived of fresh, locally grown produce. Sad, right? But those are the kinds of things when, you're working in food policy and food insecurity and thinking in a bigger picture than just, well, we need to put them somewhere where no, there's things to think about. Think about economics of the neighborhood and all that stuff, right? Are there good supermarkets? Are there good places for people to buy healthy food? That's all part of that whole solidarity thing. Now, can everybody get involved in everything? That's not realistic. But there are certain things that really resonate with us, right? That we can get involved in. And there's all kinds of stuff, right? So let's move on from community, unless anyone else has a comment in regards to community or the lack thereof, because I really think there's a lack of community right now. We really are a nation of me's and not a nation of us's, They did away with our old motto for this country, e pluribus unum, Latin, which means, who knows what it means? Does anybody know what it means? E pluribus unum? I'm just going to wait a minute. We'll just go on. We'll come back to e pluribus unum in a minute. The next thing I want to talk about is empathy. So let's take a look at empathy here. Let me get the big book. This is the big book. What did I do with it? I put it somewhere. I covered it up. Here we go. Big time. Oh, gosh. The Empathic Civilization by Jeremy Rifkin. Ash, yes, that's exactly what it means. Out of many, one. Right? It doesn't say it's a melt. It doesn't, when I was growing up, there was this whole concept of the melting pot, right? That everybody that was immigrating into the United States would get into this great big melting pot, and we'd all, how you put a bunch of metal in there and it all melts together and becomes one thing. But honestly, that's not what was happening. What was happening was the melting pot actually meant we want everybody coming here to conform to us, be like us, right? And that's not what e pluribus unum means. Out of many, one. It's like it's celebrating that diversity, but in that diversity, we are one people. We are one people, even though we're all different. And celebrate that difference, right? That's part of solidarity is letting each person develop themselves both as an individual and I'll get to that in a minute, Ash. Develop oneself as an individual, but then that individual collectively, right? We're starting to achieve our potential, each person. And so economics isn't holding us back. Our ethnicity isn't holding us back. That we're all working in it together. Education's not holding us back. It's now called a salad bowl. I guess it all depends on what kind of dressing you use as to whether it's going to be a good salad or not. Or if you use any dressing at all, or what kind of salad are you using? Is it just iceberg? Is that what kind of salad we have? I don't know. There's a kind of I forget what it's called. It's this little leafy thing. I thought it was very bitter myself. I didn't like it. It was always going into salads. I'm like, I was pulling it out. I don't want that. But yeah, the salad bowl. I had not heard of that called that before, but I can see, especially if it's like a mixed salad. Melting bowl implies absorbing into the dominant culture. Exactly. And that term melting pot, but melting bowl, same concept. It's exactly what I was taught when I was a kid. The United States was the melting pot, right? Yeah. Absorbed into the dominant culture. That's what it actually meant. And I didn't realize that. Part of the whiteness of our country is that for those of us that are participating in the dominant, in the last few days of being in a dominant culture, dominant ethnic group, is that we're invisible to it because we grew up, it was around us everywhere. I liken it to the Matrix. It's around us everywhere. It's the air we breathe. It's everything we see. We take it for granted. We assume that it's the natural way, but it isn't. But we assume that we don't even know. We just, and so we just assume that people will become like us because we're normal. We're the normal way. A salad bowl is appreciating all the parts. Okay. That's one way of looking at it, I suppose. I'll have to remember that. The salad bowl. Salad bowl concept of society. Okay, that's something for me to look into. That's new to me. And I always love new things, learning new things and expanding my intellectual horizons, so to speak. So thanks, Ash. You just added to my what? My investigative endeavors. Ruben, what about a taco bowl? I would, when I would order, I love tacos. I love tacos. But I would order a taco bowl because it didn't have the tortilla with it. And I felt the tortilla was too filling for me. And I just wanted the stuff that was in it. Right. So I didn't want to pay for something I wasn't going to eat. So instead of like buying a burrito or a taco and not eating the shell or the tortilla part, and just unwrapping it, I just buy something that didn't have that to start with. Right. And a taco bowl actually, how about this? A taco salad bowl. Let's just be inclusive here. Taco salad bowl. And I'm sure we could make this even bigger in many, many ways. One of the things that Jeremy Rifkin talks about, and this sort of is a little segue, is how language contributes to empathy and solidarity and community. Because if we didn't have language, if we didn't have the need to communicate with someone else, if we didn't have the need to communicate to somebody else something, we might not have developed language. I mean, the things that we do are based in need. The things that we see, our eye developed evolutionarily to see certain wavelengths, so we don't see all of it, and it was for survival, right? A lot of our physical characteristics and attributes are based on survival. That's how they developed over time. And I think language is part of that also, that we needed to be able to communicate to survive. Here comes the tiger. Here comes the elephant that's charging at us. Watch out. There's a big pit right there. You're about to walk into it. All kinds of stuff, rather than just grunting, really having that language. And he talks about that a little bit in here. But what I've bookmarked is a section here called Becoming Human. It's chapter 4, Becoming Human. And he starts it off very interestingly. So when was this written, Chris? It was written, for those of you that are interested, it's copyrighted 2009. So it's a while ago. It's fairly current, but it's a while ago. It's things in our culture are changing so quickly that some of the language may not be always spot on as to what's acceptable these days. But this is what he wrote. Parents have not always viewed their children the same way over history. Hi, Ash, Ruben says. A Christian parent at the close of the first millennium AD might look into the eyes of a newborn for clues as to whether the devil lurked somewhere deep inside, ready to possess them. Today, at the beginning of the third millennium AD, a parent is more likely to scrutinize a child's inner being for signs of his or her inherent good nature and sociability. That's not to say that parents expect their children to grow up to be a Mahatma Gandhi or a Nelson Mandela or a Martin Luther King Jr., only that they expect them to be more like them than, say, an Adolf Hitler or a Joseph Stalin. All of which points to the fact that while most human beings are neither saints nor monsters, we expect pro-social behavior rather than anti-social behavior of one another. So I'm going to interrupt this program for a special announcement. Ruben, you've got to go soon. Have a great night. Thank you, Ruben, for being here. You have a great night also. And we'll see you soon. Ash says, Ruben, nighty night or nighty, and with the hearts and love. And, we never get enough love. So love is always something to spread around. You can never use it up. Love you can spread around as much as you want. You'll never use it up. So it's one of those great gifts that we have, that we can give. And for any of us that do have children, the more you give, the more you have to give. There's no end to the giving. Love's just a great, getting teary-eyed here. Love is just this great thing that we don't utilize often enough. And we let other things creep in to steal our love away. So thanks, Ash, for putting that heart up there. It was a good reminder of how important love is and how it's at the root of many of these concepts. Solidarity, love, community, love, Yeah. Dwell on that for a minute. That's awesome. We could just stop there and we'll be done. We'll keep going. My eyes are watering and now they're stinging. Do you ever get that? Your eyes burn because you're tearing up? Yeah, there must be something on my eyelashes or something that's irritating my eyes. So, okay. I think I can function now. Glasses are going to stay off. Okay. Except, you know what? I can't read. Glasses going back on. Getting growing old fun. Gosh, didn't have to do this once upon a time. Oh, well. What did we do before the invention of glasses anyway? Probably were carving our words in rocks. Okay, what does he say here? We expect pro-social behavior rather than antisocial behavior of one another. That's because it is in our nature to be affectionate and caring, not remote and hateful. The misanthrope is always the exception and never the norm in any culture. We are born to nurture. Now, let that sink in for a second. What gets media attention? It's those outliers, right? Those serial killers or dictators, authoritarians, tyrants. But those are the outliers. It's not the majority of us. And one of the things he talks about, thanks, Ash. Wisdom. You all have that wisdom. One of the things he talks about is evolutionarily, when we were living in the savannas of Africa millions of years ago, that if you were an individual by yourself, your chances of survival were very slim. But if you lived in community, if you lived in a tribe and everybody was watching out for themselves, and let's say the saber-toothed tiger was attacking, and everybody could band together to fend it off. And so over time, we became hardwired to be in community and to care for one another, which is what empathy is all about, right? Caring for one another. Let's see if he's got anything else interesting to say. Today, a new generation of psychologists, developmental biologists, cognitive scientists, and pediatric researchers are probing deeply into the complex pathways of human development and pinpointing the critical role that empathic expression plays in making us into fully formed human beings. Empathy. What does he call it? The empathic expression. What does it play in developing fully deformed human beings? He goes into child development here and the process, how do children learn empathy? And it's a learned behavior, but we're hardwired for it. So it's an easy thing to learn, like language. Children's brains are wired to learn language. And it's something that they lose as they get older, which is why it's easier for children to learn multiple languages. Like, if you have a multi-language family, those kids grow up learning how to speak multiple languages. But as an adult, if you're learning a second language, it can be really difficult because our brains the way we're wired changes as we age, as we get older. And it doesn't take long to actually work out of that. But as little children, we're hardwired to learn language. We're hardwired to learn empathy, but it's a learned thing. So if a child grows up and, they're very selfish and it's me, and this is mine, a part of that is natural as they're developing their own sense of self. And that's where the parent steps in to teach the empathy, the sharing, right? The letting go of this thing, whereas I may, quote unquote, own it. It's not a part of me. It doesn't define who I am. And so my giving it up, my sharing it does not diminish myself. If I give someone, uh, I had this green hat that I would wear. I loved that hat. It was a gift by a good friend of mine. And I'll share this thing that you put up here, Ash, in just a second. Let me just finish this little story real quick. I'm walking home, and I see this fella. He's standing outside. It's a building. It's like studios, low income studios. This guy's standing out there, and I greet him. He greets me, and we start to talking. And he goes, "Man, that's a really nice hat." And I say, "Thank you very much." And we go, and he goes, I really like that hat. And I said, "Well, do you want it?" He's like, "What?" I said, "Do you want it?" He goes, "No, I can't take that." He goes, "No, it's okay." "Would you like it?" And he goes, "I don't know if it'll fit." So I took it off and I put it on him. It fit perfectly. Right. The minute he put it on, it was like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is awesome." Right. Um, Giving that, even though it was a very personal thing that I had some emotional attachment to, it didn't diminish me by giving it away. And that's something that we have to learn. And that's something that parents can really help their children deal with. So let's see what Ash has to say here. Our brainstem, the old brain, some people call it the lizard brain, right? Can't help but do those threat assessments. That's right. That's what it was built for. You're absolutely right. So it's understandable that we fall for all that clickbait. We must rise. That's a term that's pretty new in our culture, isn't it? Clickbait. We must rise above that base response. Empathy can be developed if we put our attention to it. Beautiful act of giving that hat. Well, thank you. Thank you. I miss it. It's funny. I gave it away, and every once in a while I think about it. I've never seen, here's what's really funny. It's ironic. I have not seen that guy since. Don't know what happened to him. I walk by that spot all the time. I've never seen him again. So go figure, right? But in that moment, it meant more for me to give it to him than to keep it. And it didn't diminish me. To me, that's the point, right? The things that we have that's outside our possessions, even who we think we are, as we give that up, it does not diminish us at all. And matter of fact, it allows us to get deeper into who we truly are, right? It's like that peeling the onion away, right? In order to get to that heart, or probably even a better example would be an artichoke, right? Because an onion, you get to the heart of an onion, it's still pretty much an onion. But with an artichoke, when you peel all the leaves off, you get to the heart of the artichoke, and it's tender and it's soft and it's tasty, right? And that's where the flower comes from, that heart. That's what we do as we divest ourselves of all these external things. We're peeling off those leaves and the artichoke till we get to our heart, which is our true self. Anyway, we're not going to get into this whole child development thing. Like I said, this is a thick book, right? I mean, there's no way we can cover all this. And honestly, we are 20 minutes overtime, and I've never done that. But this is a big topic, so I'm gonna keep going. If you can't stay, that is fine. This is Jeremy Rifkin, by the way. If you can't stay, that's great. There'll be a recording of it. So here's something that it's a Greenspan. I don't know the full name of the person that he's referencing. It's one of the child psychologists. He says, Greenspan is quick to point out that the development of a self-conscious identity is totally dependent on the empathic relationship between parents and child. It is only by the parent's consistent and continuous ability to accurately read the toddler's emotional state and respond effectively that the child comes to respond in kind. There's a whole thing he talks about imitation, how children imitate their parents. As a parent, I've probably seen it, right? How your child begins to mimic your behavior. Very, very interesting thing. And they're learning how to be human beings. They're learning how to be, how to function in this world, right? Little girls watch their moms to figure out how to mommies work, and little boys watch their dads as to how daddies work, and vice versa. They look at their moms, they look at their parents. How do parents work? What's it mean to be a human being? A human being. Yeah, kids mimic. That's what they do. Um, and then we have what are called mirror neurons. And so I'm going to pull up a little website here that it's like, what is it? What do we know about mirror neurons? Let's take a look at that. So many people that are still working on it, but they're fascinating. Mirror neurons. This is from NCBI, the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health. And we're just going to get the introduction here. Mirror neurons, and I'm going to enlarge this text a little bit here. It's hard to read, right? Hard to read. Thank you, Apple. It's a bit bigger here. Okay. Mirror neurons are a class of neuron that modulate their activity both when an individual executes a specific motor act and when they observe the same or similar act performed by another individual. Now, they discovered these neurons in a monkey, a macaque monkey, and macaques apparently are very similar to humans in the way their neurons work and stuff. But they've seen it in human behavior. If you see something happen to somebody else, like if you see someone get a shot in their arm, you might flinch a little bit, or if someone falls, or if you are watching a video, sometimes I'll see a video on Facebook and it'll be someone's running and they'll slip and fall. My body just tingles. It sort of just scrunches up because there's a part of me that feels that. Those are mirror neurons firing. And what they provide for us is the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, which is empathy, right? For us, the discovery of mirror neurons was exciting because it has led to a new way of thinking about how we generate our own actions and how we monitor and interpret the actions of others. This discovery prompted the notion that from a functional viewpoint, action, execution, and observation are closely related processes. And indeed, that our ability to interpret the actions of others requires the involvement of our own motor system. So that's a really interesting field of study. Really, really interesting. And there are people that are born without them, right? We've got people who have sociopathic tendencies. And there may be a discussion as to whether or not they had a genetic disposition to sociopathy, or whether that was something that they developed through childhood by child abuse and et cetera, et cetera. But for whatever reason, they no longer have the ability to be empathic. They just don't have it. There are some people that are born on the autism spectrum that they don't understand social cues. They don't have the ability to be empathic. They just don't have that ability. One of the things that they can do is they can learn behavior. They can watch people and they can learn and mimic the behavior, but they don't feel it. And empathy is about not just being a mirror and a mimic, but feeling it. It's not just an external action. It's a feeling thing, right? That not only are our motor skills able to do something, but when we see someone else do it, it's almost as though we're doing it ourselves. That's those mirror neurons. And that's empathy. And to me, it's one of those things. It's like, when you watch a movie, it's a romance movie, let's say, and it makes you cry and you're happy and you're sad. And these movies can take us through all these different emotions. Why? Because of mirror neurons. We are feeling, even though it's happening on the screen, they're just acting, but our brains are interpreting it as real. And our mirror neurons are firing as though we're doing it. And we feel it, and then we react. And so a good production good actors and actresses, good filmmaking, good playmaking, they take us there where we can feel what's going on the screen or on the stage or on the TV or on the laptop or wherever we're watching it. That we suspend our disbelief. And when we suspend our disbelief, what we're seeing, our brain interprets as real and our body feels it. That's empathy. That's empathy. That's something that comes natural to us if we allow it to be developed. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Lastly, I wanted to look at individualism. Hey, Ash, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your sharing. Thank you for participating. Yeah, give your daughter a hug and a kiss, and have everyone sleep well. Say hi to Godo for me, and one of these days I'll make it up your way. I need to get more mobile for sure. Anyway, thanks for participating. We'll see you later. We'll talk to you later. Okie dokes. So individualism, we can't end this discussion. Thank you, Ash. I love you too. Can't end this discussion without talking about individualism, which is part of, right? Personalism versus individualism, individualism in community, right? Because individualism is a real thing. And it's all about how we understand it, because it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be. But in the United States, and this is what we're going to look at, in the United States, it took a particular twist. So let's see what we have to see here. And this, once again, comes from, I think, Encyclopedia Britannica, talking about individualism. And let's make this a little bit bigger again here. Okay. Ad removed. I'm so glad. Go away. Okay. Let's see here. In the United States, individualism became part of the core American ideology by the 19th century, incorporating the influences of New England Puritanism, Jeffersonianism, and the philosophy of natural rights. We can look at all that stuff. American individualism was universalist and idealist, but acquired a harsher edge as it became infused with elements of social Darwinism. In other words, the survival of the fittest, which, interestingly enough, that's not a concept from Darwin. It's just real interesting. Anyway, rugged individualism, quote unquote, extolled by Herbert Hoover during his presidential campaign in 1928, was associated with traditional American values such as personal freedom, capitalism, and limited government. As James Bryce, British ambassador to the United States from 1907 to 1913, wrote in The American Commonwealth, which I guess was started in 1888, individualism, the love of enterprise, and the pride in personal freedom have been deemed by Americans not only their choicest, but their peculiar and exclusive possession. That's interesting. Exclusive possession, individualism. Interesting. By Americans, exclusive possession. We gain some insight as someone from another country looks at the U.S. So, the French aristocrat, political philosopher, Alexis de Tocqueville, described individualism in terms of a kind of moderate selfishness that disposes humans to be concerned only with their own small circle of family and friends. Observing the workings of the American democratic tradition for Democracy in America, it's a book he wrote, 1835 to 40, Tocqueville wrote that by leading each citizen to isolate himself from his fellows and to draw apart with his family and friends, individualism sapped the virtues of public life, for which civic virtue and association were a suitable remedy. For the Swiss historian Jacob Burckhardt, individualism signified the cult of privacy, which, combined with the growth of self-assertion, had given impulse to the highest individual development that flowered in the European Renaissance. One of the things that happened in the United States, and we're going to say bye-bye there, and that's from the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, online. One of the things that happened in America is we moved away from big families, multi-generational families, to what was called the nuclear family, mom, dad, and the kids. And that was a big thing. That was seen as progress. That was seen as modern. That was seen as futuristic, right? The nuclear family, mom, dad, and the kids. And that's what this is talking about. It really gets away from that sense of grandparents and taking care of our elders and seeing our connectedness in the larger picture, right? The indigenous peoples of the Americas, some of them lived in they were called hogans, right? Just big long houses, and they all lived together. And I think some of the Scandinavian peoples lived in long houses. They all lived under the same roof. They all lived together, not in separate abodes. A whole different way of looking at culture, how we separated ourselves and segregated ourselves, and how we can live our entire lives without even meeting our neighbors. I like Mr. Rogers, won't you be my neighbor? No, I'm not even going to ask you about it. I'm not going to say hi to you. I'm not going to knock on your door and introduce myself. I'm not going to welcome you. No. Yeah. So, thanks, Victor. Thanks. It's one of my favorites. I got these shirts from my daughter. She goes to these thrift stores and vintage things and finds these nice, colorful shirts. This is one of my favorites. So thank you, Victor. So we've become a nation of individuals, very much so. Thank you, Ruben. This is my other. I have two Rubens that are friends, and this is the other Ruben, and he keeps me real. And you're so stupid anyway. So I love you. Anyway, and our separated lifestyles. We're in our homes. We then go into our cars. We drive by ourselves. It just fosters this disconnectedness with each other. There's nothing like going for a walk in your neighborhood and seeing things that have been there for years, but you're seeing it for the first time because you've driven past it umpteen times, but you've done it so fast and you're focused on the road, you don't see it, right? And you don't greet people that are maybe on their porch or that are on the sidewalk walking. So we lose a lot of community because of the way our culture is structured in living these independent, isolated lives. So these are things I think that are important to talk about. And through dialogue, through discussion, through the sharing of ideas, hopefully, we'll come together as a society for the common good, in solidarity, so that our whole country, our whole state, our whole city, our whole world, eventually, I don't know that we'll ever get there. I really don't. This is a kind of almost a utopian thought, but maybe we can, maybe we can't. I don't know. But I dream of a day where we lay aside our own selfishness and begin to embrace one another and think about what's good for someone else, what's good for the whole, and then behave in like kind. So it's been an hour and a half. Can you believe it? Boy, I went by so fast, but I had a lot to talk about. I'm glad I was able to get it off my chest. And I'm glad that many people went on this little journey with me. It's always nice to get some feedback. You guys need to be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. Yeah, we're all in it together, right? What was, Ben Franklin said during the Revolutionary War. He said, "We all hang together, or we'll all hang separately." Right? And that's kind of how life is. We're either going to get through this together, or we're not going to get through it. My friend Ruben here always likes to say, "We're not going to make it." Yeah. Well, we're not going to make it if we don't start coming together and acting in concert for the betterment of our society, our family, our friends, our community, our neighborhood, our state, our country, other countries. Solidarity is not just about me and you or the United States. It's about the world. It's about where injustice exists. What's the phrase? Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, or injustice for one is injustice for all. And that's solidarity. That's really looking at it from what's good for you is good for me. What's bad for you is bad for me, regardless of what it is, right? And so we grow and we learn and we check ourselves. We learn about our unconscious biases. We, reflect upon our generosity, our willingness to give of ourselves, of our possessions. That's not what defines us. Money doesn't define me. What I own doesn't define me. And who I truly am. Finding who I truly am. That's what's important. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here with me live. Thank you for those who are watching the recording. It's a long recording, and I apologize for that. I normally provide a section of time for a call-in show, but honestly, I've really overstayed my welcome. So I'm going to forego the call-in show. We'll do it again next week. And if you've got any passing comments that you want to leave while we exit here, I've got a little video that I play to end the night, and we can always comment while that video's running. So, thank you, Victor. Thank you. Did you learn anything? Oh, poor Ruben. Well, all that means is you're gonna have to join me next week. Now, normally the show is from 7 to 8, so we've gone over time by a whole bunch. But there was just no way for me to squeeze all this into an hour because I talked about some other stuff at the top of the show. Anyway, hopefully you can join me next week, every Thursday night from 7 to 8. And it's called It's About Us. And I stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So you all have a great evening. And let's go ahead and do our swan song here.